Hello everyone and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Ads Lyson. If you want 15% off your surfing and outdoor gear, look no further. Go to North Korea on the internet and use the code, capital letters, Grumpy Surf with an extra capital F on the end of surf to receive 15% off your purchase. On the podcast today, I have a Royal Marines Mountain Leader. He has served operationally in Afghanistan and Iraq, but has also spent a lot of time near the North and South Poles in Arctic environments. He has some amazing stories and is a truly inspirational human being. Please enjoy my conversation with Matt Hoey. Matt Hoey, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, good, man. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming, I think.
Yeah, mate, I've asked you, maybe a couple of months ago to come on here and talk about your antics?
Both been busy, so finally got time to sit down and get it done.
Well, you've probably been busy. I haven't.
Life is busy, mate. Life is busy.
Yeah, what have you been up to?
Well, obviously work's there, and then family as well, because obviously schools are closed, so trying to homeschool 3 kids and yeah, just keep the family life going and sell my house as well. So that's obviously in the back burner. Every couple of days you'll have someone come around and have a look, so you have to tidy up all the kids' mess and yeah, get it looking good.
Yeah, so a little bit of background. You're a mountain leader in the Royal Marines. Let's go right back to the very, very start. So let's go back to sort of like the early days as a kid. You know, were you always an outdoorsy person as a kid?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up on a council estate in Emsworth, back sort of Portsmouth way. Typical kind of single parent family, only kid, only child, until my half sister came along a bit later on. But you know, I grew up, yeah, as we all did in the 80s, really, didn't we? You know, riding our BMXs and climbing trees and playing football. And football was my real passion as a kid, and right the way through until I joined the Corps, really, straight from school. Yeah, I was always outdoors. I was always looking for some sort of adventure, whether that be building a den in the woods or yeah, always outside.
What brought you to join the Royal Marines then? Did you have a family history?
Yeah, both my parents were in the army, and also my stepdad was as well. So I think I was always kind of inclined to go that way. I was in the cadets as a kid, and you know, as I was coming up to sort of end of school time, I explored the military and what it had to offer. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Thought about joining the army as an officer, and then I did the usual. I went to, as it was then, of course, the Armed Forces Careers Office. Went down there just to have a look at what was on offer. The duty bootneck in there grabbed me, pulled me to one side, took me into the room, showed me this hoofing video of the Corps, you know, all the good stuff they do. Clearly it didn't show you laying on sentry at 3 a.m. on the middle of Dartmoor in the pouring rain, and it didn't show you the working parties that you do endlessly, but it showed you all the good stuff. And straight away that kind of hooked me, and you know what, I was just finishing my GCSEs. I didn't really know much about the Corps, but I signed on there and then and kind of took the plunge, I think, much to my mum's amusement, I think. But yeah, I think I was always destined to do something military, like I say, just because of the family background, and that's what, yeah, that's the way I ended up going.
Did you end up going to the careers office and the guy getting you to do 5 pull-ups in the doorway? Do you remember doing that?
No, I never did the pull-ups. Everyone always talks about that, but I never did. I don't know. I was fairly stacked when I was 16, as stacked as 16-year-olds can be. So maybe you looked at me and thought, yeah, he'll crack that. But no, there were no pull-ups. Like I say, I just literally went in there to have a look around, and yeah, the bootneck grabbed me, and the rest is history, as I say. It took, I think it was pretty quick back then. So from actually going in the careers office on that day, which would have been, it was GCSE time, so it would have been sort of May, and I walked through the gates of Lympstone in that October, so it was pretty quick turnaround, really. Yeah, back in the times.
So you joined up when you were 16?
I was about 3 weeks after my 17th birthday, yeah, because I was one of the oldest in the school year. My birthday's September, so my birthday was September, and I joined the Corps on the 19th of October, 98. So yeah, I was sort of 4 or 5 weeks after my 17th birthday, which was really daunting for a young lad, because although I'd done a little bit of cadet time and things like that, but other than that, I had no knowledge of what the military did or what was expected of me, and I was probably a little bit naive, actually. And I really struggled with recruit training because of that. You know, I was fairly fit. I wasn't the fittest by any means, and I kind of sort of muddled my way through it, as a lot of lads do. But you know, I'm sure we'll talk about it more. But as you come on to your career, you learn. Most of your learning is done after training, isn't it? It's not, you know, you tick the boxes to get through and get spat out the other end. But most of your learning actually starts once you finish training, really. So yeah, luckily.
Did you join up knowing full well that everything to do with recruit training, Royal Marines recruit training, is all endurance based? Or did you join up like me thinking that, do you know what? I don't even know what I thought when I joined up, because I went off other people's stories, and there was about 20 of us at school that said we were going to do it. And I was the only person that actually went ahead and joined up. I was not the fastest runner, never have been long distance.
Same.
So I was pretty much the same as you, mate. I literally joined up and I just muddled my way through it. That's a really good analogy of putting it.
Yeah, very much so. But you know, I've spent time on training teams since, and you see a lot of lads who do exactly that. You know, they're not the best and they muddle their way through, but they turn out to be really good Marines. And I think as long as you can, you know, as long as you do what's asked of you when you need to do it, then that, you know, that's all that people can really ask of you, I guess. And like I say, I was never the best recruit, but I turned out to be a half decent Marine, you know, and I did some all right stuff. So that was really good. But with regards to endurance side of it, and it's not my thing. And I've noticed as I get older, actually, your endurance definitely increases. But when I was at school, I was a sprinter in athletics, and my endurance was not good at all. So I didn't really know much. Like I said, I didn't really know much about it. I remember doing my PRMC, as it was then. And I had Dixie Dean, who you probably know, as my PTI on that. And it was the most horrific 3 days I think I've ever had. But I don't know if that's because it was horrific or if it was just because you're not used to it, quite possibly. But yeah, I remember the PRMC and the bottom field especially being particularly horrible.
Going from, especially being a young lad, going into an environment like that is alien to you. For you, for instance, you've come straight out of school and gone into that. It is a daunting prospect, and we have both taken recruits through training. We've both been on training teams, whether it's as a recruit instructor or, you know, I was a PTI and a recruit instructor as well. And I think it's important that when people do something wrong, or, you know, let's use the word loosely, punishing somebody to correct their ways, you're giving them the reason why you're doing it. And I think when we went through, it was literally you got thrashed and you didn't know why you were getting thrashed. And then it just came back to being, it's character building.
Absolutely, yeah. And times have changed for the better. And people, I'm sure they did it when we were in training. People say, oh, it's getting easier, it's getting easier. I don't think it is, because actually there's far more to learn now. You know, guys that are going through training now have a lot more to learn, but they're also taught in a much better way. So as you know, you would have done the same as me when we did the old the skillet arms course and the recruit instructor sort of courses and things like that, defense train the trainer and that sort of stuff. You're actually taught how to teach. So like you say, back in the day, you know, you missed the target, we used to get a kick around the back of the helmet and told to apply ourselves. Well, what does that really mean? It doesn't really mean anything, does it? You know, so I think times have definitely changed, and I don't think it's the fact that training's got easier, because there's probably guys coming through now who are far better trained than we ever were, purely because of the kit and equipment they're getting and the stuff that's being asked of them, especially with FCF now. But yeah, I think times have changed for the better. You know, a lot of older bowls, you hear it all the time. Well, it's getting easier, or, you know, don't make them like they used to. Well, actually, the standard's still the same. Guys are still making the same standard, or just maybe it's delivered slightly differently. And like I say, for the better, I think. The
way that we're taught to deliver and teach people has definitely come a long way, especially when it comes to the cognitive side of things, where we understand, especially as you get older. I definitely found this as I've got older, is that you understand how people learn and the different ways that people learn. It's not black and white. It's not, this is the way to do it. If you don't do it, you're going to be wrong. And I think that's a life skill as well, because it goes throughout life, whether you're in a business, you own your own business, you're in recruiting or something like that. You take in these people and you're trying to develop them or give them a skill, well, then some people are just not going to get that. And I think definitely now instructors are starting to get taught the correct way to do it. Okay, yes, some people might say this is the pink and fluffy way of doing things. Granted, it is, but I think if you're horrible to somebody, like what probably happened to us, definitely it did to me, is that I am not going to learn anything because I'm in fear of the repercussions of what's going on. Whereas if you talk to somebody as a normal human being and you try and put it away in lots of different ways so that they get it, they're going to learn far more quickly than they are being terrified.
Yeah, absolutely. And CTC has really led the way with its way it delivers training, and there's a lot of other organizations out there that want to be like CTC because of how it's guys, how we deliver that training. And like you say, you can only shout at someone so much, can't you? Because at some point they're just going to turn off and nothing's going to go in then. So there's a lot of thought to say that, well, actually it's the military and it should be, it should be an authoritarianism. It should be didactic teaching. Well, actually, yes, it should, because there's going to be times when you need to have to shout. But also, like you say, not everyone learns in the same way. And quite often giving someone a piece of equipment and telling them, well, you've got 10 minutes to go away and find out how that works, that may well be better teaching for them, and a little bit of giving them a little bit of autonomy to go away and find out how that works, rather than actually giving them, reading them out the pamphlet that you've read up on the night before. So yeah, there's got to be different ways of doing it, and I think, like I say, I think the way we're doing it now is far better than it was.
What was your key memory from being in recruit training? We could talk about recruit training for hours, but what was your key takeaway? What's the most memorable experience that you remember?
I've got loads, but do you know what? The one that always reminds me is Christmas. So last week before Christmas, obviously everyone gets Christmas dinner, don't they? But we were in the field. I forget which exercise it was, probably around Hunter's Moon sort of time, but we were brought out the old hot box into the field, and we were all given our Christmas meal out of a hot box in our mess tins, and then it just went then into typical training team, got an hour to fill sort of mode. So we did the duty Pac-Man, where all the guys lined up and we were going left and right, and the training team were throwing potatoes and sprouts at us and that sort of stuff. And then we had some music, some Christmas music, and one of the lads was covered in talcum powder and he was made to run around as the snowman. So it really brought out that cheerfulness and adversity, because it was absolutely freezing. It was pouring down in rain, it was miserable. It was horrendous, but actually, yeah, the old cheerfulness and adversity really came through there, because the training team, they had a laugh. All right, it was at our expense, but we all had we all had a bit of fun and a bit of a laugh at the end of it. So that was probably, obviously, other than pass out, and nothing's ever going to top getting that green beret, is it, and marching off that parade square. But yeah, that was kind of my lasting memory, really, is the snowman in the winter on Woodbury Common.
Do you know what? A lot of people have said this, and I don't know whether it's a cliche, and you've just said it there, was getting your green beret was up there with a lot of things. I'm going to counter that and say it wasn't for me. I got to a point where I was just like, I've had enough. I just want to pass out of training, and I just want to get out of here. Okay, look, this might really annoy quite a few people, me saying this, but whether I got to give them a lid, green beret, and I got, we got our CS95 and we got our flashes to sew on there. I was just like that. Can we get out of here yet?
I think there is a little bit of that, isn't there? And there's a lot to be said for these lads that go through training and end up as a clerk or a driver, which people always say about, oh, that's not what you join up for. But ultimately, at the end of, depending on how long you've been in training, depending on what you've been through, what injuries you had, then you probably want that little bit of a respite for a year or two. But yeah, I mean, it's never going to be an anti-climax, is it? Because you've got your family there and all that. But I just think, again, it's the unknown. Then you've now gone from being the biggest fish in the little bowl on the Friday, and then on Monday morning you're a little fish in a massive bowl again in a commando unit, and you're getting sprugged off to go and get the milk from the naffy or whatever it might be. So yeah, there's a lot of unknowns with it, isn't there?
So when you passed out of training, where did you go from there? Did you go straight to a commando unit? Or in fact, I'm going to digress with this question a little bit actually. So you know when you come towards the end of training, you have all these lectures and they tell you this is the career path you could take. You know, you can be a PTI, you can be a mortarman, you can be in heavy weapons, you can be a clerk, you can be a drill instructor. Did you have an idea in your head what career path you wanted to take in the Marines, or did you literally just go, yeah, cheers, and just kind of take the GD role as it went through, or did you have a clear path in your mind that what you wanted to do?
I didn't really. I'd grown up a lot around boats and living on the coast, and there was an inkling to become an LC, which didn't really pan out for one reason or another. But I ended up going to 4-2 as a GD Marine, and you know, we're talking before DSS, before PSQs and SSQs and all that sort of stuff. So you would go and be a GD Marine, and some of the GD Marines, I joined K Company straight out of training at 4-2, and some of the guys there have been GD Marines for 5, 6, 7 years, you know, and not even looking at getting a juniors. So it was a completely different corps back then. And you had time to experience the corps a little bit and see what was around. Yeah, just sort of enjoy it a little bit. I think the problem with now is you only get a year or whatever you get as a GD Marine, or maybe 2 years, I think, and it's just so rushed because you're straight away pressured into, well, what do you want to be next? Well, I don't really know because I've only seen the corps for a year. I haven't really experienced that much, but I was quite lucky in that I did 7 years as a GD Marine before I picked up juniors, and yeah, you know, I managed to see a lot of the corps. And I had no idea that I was going to be an ML right through until I did an MSI's course after my first Norway, and I was at CLR actually, and Bob Madison was a unit ML. He needed guys to go on the MSI's course, what was then, you know, military ski instructor course as it was. And I walked in the training office just one day, and he happened to know that I'd done a Norway because he took me on it, and he said, right, you're going to Norway as an MSI. And I went out, and don't get me wrong, I was a terrible skier on my first Norway. I had an absolutely terrible time. So I thought, well, I'm going on a ski instructor course and I can't actually ski for toffee. So I went out, and the MSI's course as it was a full month, day on the slope, day on the track. And when I came back from there, my skiing was pretty decent. So I went out to Norway after Christmas with Bob, and took 3 cold weather warfare courses through with CLR, and we were having a beer one night in the bar, and he said, when you're doing your ML's course then, Matt? And I kind of, you know, I'd had a few beers by then, and I was like, yeah, come on then, let's give it a crack. And that was back in the day when you could just phone up and get someone loaded, you know, not like you can now. It was very much mates rates. He called up to the guy running the next aptitude, and that was me. I was on it. So yeah, I never really sort of had a vision of going ML, but I really enjoyed the Norway piece and enjoyed the skiing. And when I went back as an instructor, I saw Norway from the other side of the fence. So rather than the novice side, I saw the instructor side, and I really enjoyed that. And I thought, yeah, I'll have a piece of that. And the rest is kind of history, really. Yeah,
Norway is a very unique place. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on, I guess. I've got a really good story about Bob Madison, and it makes me laugh even now. I remember we were all lined out, the very first Norway I did, we were all lined out, and he was doing like an opening brief, and it was, excuse my French, but it was the first time I'd ever been called a shit cunt and an Elson. For somebody that doesn't know what an Elson is, it's basically a field toilet where you take a crap and stuff, and it gets all bagged up, and it's just left in the snow basically when you're on exercise. And I thought it was the funniest thing on the planet. And do you know what? I got really good friends with Bob, 10, 15 years later when I was down at 4-2 Commando. And I always remind him of it. And it was one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life.
Such a good guy. It's a lot of good guys. It's the core, isn't it? Of course, there's a lot of good guys out there. But yeah, and little things like that stick in the back of your mind. Yeah, real good times.
We skipped a few years there. So you passed out of training. Did you end up doing any tours? Did you? Because that would have been when you passed out of training would have been what?
Yeah, July 99. So
99, yeah.
I went on to one of the med trips on Aurora. I think it was in 2000. I was on Ocean, and I was only 18 at the time. I was back in the day actually when you didn't get LSA days, believe it or not. So you had to do 18 months to get LSA. So I missed out on a lot of LSA days there. But yeah, we headed out to the Med to do a med trip, and on HMS Ocean, and we were in Marseille on exercise, and we got fastballed back to the ship, just really randomly fastballed back to the ship for no reason that anyone could sort of talk about. And then it wasn't until about 3 or 4 days later when we knew we'd been fastballed to go somewhere. We weren't sure where, and it was all mega hush hush, and this is before the days of mobile phones and internet, so no one really knew. And the first we heard of where we were was one of the guys called home. I think it must have been his parents or whoever it was, said, "Oh, you're going to Sierra Leone." So obviously that spread like wildfire around the ship, and we ended up going ashore in Sierra Leone, and I spent 4 weeks or so between the airport at Lungi, Freetown, and down living in some lady's back garden, and it's like an absolute oven in the back of a furnace in the middle of the jungle. And so I was really lucky that at 18 I'd been thrown straight into an operational environment. Boy, it wasn't massively kinetic. I don't think we really did a lot. We didn't get any rounds down or anything like that, but the threat was always there, and it was great. As a young lad, a young 18-year-old lad, it was really good to experience that operational environment, and actually everything you trained for, even down to just doing sentry, when you're on ops, it's completely different to being on an exercise, because you know that you need to be on your game, you can't fall asleep, it's essentially life or death there. So yeah, I was really lucky to get straight out, and this is a time when ops were in an abundance, really, because Northern Ireland was still going on. And I came back from Sierra Leone, and then we went out to Northern Ireland a few months later. So I had 6 months in Northern Ireland at Fort Hill. I think we were one of the last companies to operate out of Fort Hill before it was shut down there. So by 1920, I'd done a lot in my career in a very, very short period of time. But the experience and the stuff I'd experienced there was really valuable for me, because it brought me on leaps and bounds. I'd come from being this young lad from a fishing village from the south coast who was fairly inward looking and didn't have a lot of confidence, into the Corps, where that obviously brought it out a little bit in you, and then straight away into 2 operations, which was just crazy. From there, we came back from Northern Ireland, and we were launched then straight into Untitled, as you know. And yeah, the whole sort of 2-3 year period was just a crazy whirlwind of operations, and it's a shame that lads aren't experiencing that nowadays, because a lot of guys are joining up. I was chatting to one of my lads yesterday who's he's thinking about possibly leaving the Corps, and he just wants to go on ops, and unfortunately it isn't forthcoming at the minute because there isn't an appetite for it for many reasons. But we were really lucky. I mean, you were the same. We were really lucky to get those in at an early age.
Yeah, I think we were, by the Second World War. Look, don't get me wrong. I know people didn't want to go to war. They didn't want to go and fight the Germans or anything like that. I'm using this as an example, but we joined the Corps. We all saw the same videos. We saw the Falklands films and, An Ungentlemanly Act, and read the books and all that sort of thing that kind of made you want to join, heard all the stories from people too. So when you get that name, a Royal Marines Commando, you are a commando. So it's embedded into you and ingrained and indoctrinated as you go through that 36-week process, from going from a normal human being to, I'm going to sound really cheesy, commando fighting machine, because all you want to do is go and fight. That's what you're trained to do. We were very, very lucky that we got to do that. We were in that environment where you had Sierra Leone, Ireland is just finishing, then the Twin Towers happened, so we went to Afghanistan, then Iraq happened and we did the invasion of Iraq, and then the next Herrick tours happened for the next 10 years. We got to do what we trained to do, and like you were saying there, it's quite a difficult situation for people to be in. But at the end of the day, and this is what I used to say to recruits on training, and one of them who sadly lost his life during Afghanistan, you've got to be careful what you wish for as well. Because yes, you do train for this. However, when you get into that situation where there are live rounds flying past your head, people are getting blown up, it is a surreal environment to be in until it's realistic, where people are taking casualties, we are taking casualties. Then it becomes real, and then you're like, is this really for me? And you can see that through the people that have done the 5 years. Maybe they've done their 4 years when they passed out of training and gone to Afghanistan, and then they've seen it for real and they've gone, shit, man, I don't want to be involved in this anymore. I mean, I think we're a little bit weird because we stayed and grounded out. But yeah, it's definitely something that my thing that I used to tell people is you need to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we both lost a lot of good mates in Afghan and things like that, and absolutely, you should be careful what you wish for. But I think for young lads coming through, they do all the training, and we were the same. There's nothing better than being in the middle of a scrap, is there? Let's face it. I mean, some of my funniest times have been in the middle of a firefight. But yeah, you have to sort of counterbalance that, and we were the lucky ones who came back. So yeah, it's very much a case of, lads, you might wish for ops, but sometimes shit gets real,
Yeah, I could get real quick too.
Real quick, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we've talked a little bit about Afghan and Iraq kind of briefly, and you've gone and you've talked about how you got to be persuaded to become a mountain leader. Two-part question, really. First of all, can you just talk briefly about what a mountain leader is, and then also, to an extent, talk about what it takes to make a mountain leader as well?
Yeah, sure. So MLs are the UK's cold weather operators and instructors, if you like, for want of a better expression. There's not many of us. There's only about 60 of us in the whole of UK defence, and it's our job to deliver both an operational capability and an instructional capability as well. And a lot of people, I think, in recent years have gone with the theory that MLs are just there to instruct, and it does feel a little bit like that sometimes. But we also do have an operational output as well, with the likes of SRS. But our bag really is so vertical access, whether that be rock, cliffs, ice, or buildings, or maritime as it is now, which is being developed all the way. So getting up stuff, getting down stuff, obstacles, surveillance and reconnaissance. Again, the whole GMR piece, which is, a lot of people will probably tell you, GMR is dead now, ground mounted reconnaissance, because we've got drones, we've got UAVs, we've got stuff that can do that, satellites and things. But actually, when all's said and done, if that all goes down, or if there's a problem, then you need eyes on the ground, and that's our job to do, is to get in and get that information back to the HQs. And then clearly a big part of our role is the cold weather piece. So that was termed as Arctic training. We now we use the term cold weather because you don't necessarily have to be in the Arctic, but those are our three sort of main deliverables. So the VA stuff, the S&R, and the cold weather piece. And like I say, there's not many of us, so it's a busy branch to be in, because you're constantly being requested for delivering something, whether that be some climbing down in Cornwall, or some urban stuff in London, or quite clearly a lot of the year we're out in Norway. So we spend usually January till March in Norway, delivering cold weather training to the rest of not only 3 Commando Brigade, but it's becoming more and more the Army. I think the RAF Reg are out there this year as well, having a piece of the action. So yeah, it's a busy branch to be in. But it's also, because it's so busy, there's a lot of opportunities there. I've been really lucky to travel to some of the places I've been purely because I'm an ML, and I probably wouldn't have had that if I was in any other specialisation. Again, going back to what drew me to be an ML was, I didn't really sort of aspire to be one, but I had a lot of mates who are MLs, and I'd heard a lot of stories and worked with a lot of them. My first ever section commander was an ML, and he was probably one of the best guys I ever worked with. And I guess that must have stuck in my mind a little bit, that I wanted to be like him and go down that route. So it's a busy specialisation, but the experiences that you gain and the knowledge, qualifications and things like that, and just the whole rote work piece, it's a really good line to be in.
Talk about a little bit about the training as well. So There are certain phases that you go through, don't you? So, you know, when you go back down to Lympstone, and there's a climbing phase, there's an Arctic phase, there's a recce phase as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the ML's course is 9 months long. Starts usually July, sort of July, August. You've got summer leave in there as well. And it finishes post Norway in March. So it's a long old 9 months. And if you add on to that your command training, which you need to do before you go on it to become a corporal, you know, you're talking the best part of a year there. So it's not something to be taken lightly, and it is a course that you have to go into head on with a full aspiration that that's what you want to go, because quite often you'll see people that come in and straight away you think, well, they're a little bit half-hearted with this, and generally they're going to fall by the wayside because you need to be committed to it. So yeah, we start with a month of climbing, rock climbing down in Cornwall, again going right back to the roots of Cliff Assault Wing post Second World War, where everything was established down in Cornwall. Places like Bezegran, Commando Ridge, Sennen, a lot of the climbing routes that have been put up down there were actually put up by cliff leaders in the 50s. So we go right back to basics. You know, if you've never climbed before, as I had never climbed before when I went on the twos course, you know, again, it's slightly shocker capture because there's a lot of information you've got to take in there in the first few weeks. So there's a month there, but that's also the conditioning phase as well. So whilst you'll climb sort of most of the day, sort of 9 till 3, there's a good phys session at the end of that. It usually involves the beach, sandbags, stretchers, a lot of fireman's carries, all sorts of crazy crawls up and down sand dunes, but it serves a purpose because not only is it conditioning you to the later phases, so the mountaineering phases in Scotland, you know, you're carrying heavy Opsbergens, but it also kind of acts as a bit of a weeding out process as well, because you don't want guys later on in the course who they're not up to it physically and mentally, then that Cornwall phase is really there to weed them out. So we usually lose quite a few guys in Cornwall through both injury and voluntary withdrawal, whatever it might be. So the Cornwall phase is tough, and I really struggled. Again, you know, we were talking earlier about not being a runner, and there's a lot of running in Cornwall. So I really struggled with that. And I used to see some of the other guys that were on course with me, you know, really good lads who were absolute whippets, and they were out the blocks, you know, every phys sesh, they were at the front, leading the way, you know, 6.5, 7 minute mile guys. And I really struggled with the first Cornwall month. But I spoke to, again, another old and bold ML, Andy Ives. I spoke to Andy and he said to me, how are you getting on? And I said, I'm really struggling, to be honest, with the phys. And he just sort of looked at me and he said, Matt, as long as you're there at the end, that's all anyone can ask. And I sort of held on to that. And I was there at the end. And that's what got me through the Cornwall phase. You then progress on to the mountaineering sort of side of things, where you are looking at your endurance stuff and your big legs. And that's where I then sort of came into my own, because I'm not a runner, but I can plod all day and I can yomp all day. And that's what you really need to be. Certainly in the Scotland phase, which is coming up to Christmas, where you are carrying a big heavy Bergen for a lot of miles across some really pretty tough terrain. You know, you're up to your knees in water every 2 minutes. You're falling over in the middle of the night, and you're climbing up and down, you know, cliff faces to get where you need to be to get that OP in and to get that information back to the HQ. So it really, you know, it really comes into force on the ML's course that you can either be that racing snake at the front, or you can be the strong yomper lad, of which both are equally needed. But you need that sort of mental resilience as well to get you through, because I remember 3-4 o'clock in the morning in Scotland, just pouring down with rain, everything's soaked, and I'm talking your Bergen soaked, your sleeping bag soaked. You know, you're 2 weeks into a 3-week exercise in December in Scotland, and that takes some real mental toughness to get through. You know, and then you're into a 10-day survival phase, which sounds good. Actually, it's pretty boring. You just sat around in a hooch looking at the fire for 10 days, wondering, you know, what mischief you can get up to on a little island off the coast of Scotland. Becomes pretty mind-numbing, but you're always thinking about your first meal. And this is one thing I remember actually is spent 10 days in the hooch on Islay in survival. And we all got on the ferry at the end of it. We had a quick wash in the river because there were no shower facilities or anything like that. We were given our clothes. We had a quick wash in the lake. And we got on the ferry to go back to mainland, and everyone was straight to the buffet restaurant, as you would be. and we were all ordering loads and loads of scran, but our stomachs had shrunk that much from not eating. We hadn't eaten for 10 days. And our stomachs had shrunk that much. Literally, we had a couple of mouthfuls and everyone was just throwing all this food in the bin. But yeah, no, and then you're into Christmas leave. So at this point now, all your mates that went on selection, they've all finished. So they're all badged as SF operators. And you've got to go to Norway for 3 months. So yeah, again, you know, but at this point, the light's at the end of the tunnel. And Norway is, if you're an all right skier, then it's not too bad. There's still some long Norge finale finishes with a 200k ski across the Hardangervidda, or it did then. It's in a different location now. But yeah, some long skis, some heavy bergens, and some real soul searching in the middle of the night to get yourself there. But you know what? You get through it. It's like everything, isn't it? I'm sure it's the same with PTI's course. You know, there's weeks where you think, and back to recruit training as well, I just can't get through this. But you take every day as it comes, and you keep marching on that bearing, and eventually you get there.
I talked to Lee Spencer. I use the analogy of a tick list.
You did, yeah. It was a great podcast, actually. He's a good guy.
Yeah, and I still use it now, where you have something that's hard and you use that as a comparison. So the next thing you do that's harder, that's your next tick list. And you know, you talking about that, there was one Norway that I did, and I got absolutely smashed for about 3 days. And it wasn't because I was rubbish at something. It was just because we just got pinged to go on like an ambush. We got to go and do a patrol somewhere, or go and do a recce, or set up an observation post. And it was just one thing after another, and it was the same 6 guys doing it, and I was absolutely in the clip. And I remember skiing up to this ambush site, and we all got lined out in this woodblock by this track. I was a really good skier. I'd skied like when I was younger. I was typical middle class, skiing holidays with the school and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So I was all right. And some of the lads that were with, they were absolute horrendous. They were real biffs. Yeah, big, real biffs, falling left, right and centre, pokes getting smashed everywhere, carrying all the kit. And I remember going to this ambush site, and we all lined up, and literally we were there for about 2 seconds, ambush set, and all you heard was like so loud. It was so funny. And then we got bumped, and we ended up having to like break contact for about 2k in snowshoes. It was ridiculous.
Brilliant. I remember actually you reminded me of something there. When I was go back to training bit, I know, but I was in training and we were in an ambush, and classic one happened, and the enemy walked past and no one opened up on them. And then so they came back the other way, whistling a life on the ocean wave, at which point obviously they got the good news. Like, but yeah, classic ambush, isn't it? We've all been there.
Training scenarios, like you were saying, are made to be difficult for realistic situations. I mean, I'm sure you've been in an ambush live very similar to what I have, and it is nothing really like to what the real life situation is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on the conclusion of the ML's course, you are pretty much the Royal Marines and the British Forces version of a outdoor pursuit instructor to a certain extent, because you know you're qualified in climbing, mountaineering, skiing, military side of things. You know, you've got different jobs. You've got, you know, SRS, which is for old money, or SRS is Special Reconnaissance Squadron.
Yeah, so Surveillance and Reconnaissance Squadron. Yeah, what was BRF or BPT and old money?
Yeah, so Brigade Reconnaissance Force, or exactly Brigade that. Patrol Troop was the original one, which were like the forward recce elements, much like the Pathfinders for the paras.
Yeah, correct.
There are lots of different jobs to bounce into, which I think is probably what makes the ML branch quite appealing to a lot of people. However, this is the question that I'm going to pose to you. Why did you go for something that is 9 months long, knowing full well that you could have gone on Special Forces selection and done 2/3 of the time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a classic question. The $1 million question is why not SF? And let's not take away anything from SF, because although their initial selection is 6 months. Of course, they go on after that and do more and more continuation training. So it's not that the ML's course is longer, it's just the actual course itself is longer. But so yeah, I mean, for me, I had 2 SBS troop sergeants, and this is back in the day. Again, we're going back to when every unit had an SC1, and I had 2 troop sergeants when I was a young Marine who were both SCs, and they were just, you know, they were awesome guys, and you look up to them and think, yeah, you know, this is exactly super soldier, it's exactly the sort of bloke I want to be like. And they were incredibly fit, and when it came to phys as a young lad, I just never could keep up with them. And I guess that kind of always hung in the back of my mind, would be like, have I got it in me physically? So although the ML's course is physically hard and physically demanding, it never really caught my eye to go on selection. I toyed with it a little bit after Afghan, because I kind of thought, well, I've kind of done everything now as a bootneck. You know, I've been on ops, and Herrick 9 was a particularly crunchy tour as well. And I thought, do you know what, I've done enough now. I think I'll have a go at selection, but I never got around to it. And then of course kids come along and family come along, and then you've got to make that decision between, you know, do I want to be away? And let's face it, you know, the guys at Poole and Hereford, they're away constantly, aren't they? And unfortunately there's a lot of divorced guys there. So do I really want to go down that route? Possibly not. And then, you know, I'm at the point now where I'm well past it anyway. You know, I'm 40 years old this year, so it's definitely not going to happen. But I think I just got to a point where I was content with where I was, especially with the ML's course. I was happy that I'd done it. I was really enjoying the Norways every year. I was really enjoying, you know, the climbing. I've done a couple of good expeditions, and I guess I was just content in where I was. And yeah, it never really became a thing to go on selection, so I never did.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your time when you're on HMS Endurance. So HMS Endurance is a naval ship that goes and documents different environments, mainly around sort of like the southern Atlantic. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. So I got to correct you there. So I never did endurance, mate. I went on an expedition to Antarctica. I've never been lucky enough to do that, and that is a really unique job. So for those that don't know, HMS Endurance, as it was, is now obviously HMS Protector. Yeah, they're tasked with Antarctic exploration and survey and all that kind of stuff. And there's an ML1 on there, and that's a great job, isn't it? To do that for a year or 2 years. It used to be 2 years, it's now 1 year. But just to go down there and when I was down there, although I wasn't on a Protector, I was on a civvy yacht, believe it or not, and another little jolly I managed to get onto. What a place, man, Antarctica. It's just so remote and just amazing. You know, the wildlife and the nature that's down there. Honestly, it's breathtaking. You know, it sounds a little bit beef, but there's places when you're down there, you just look and you just think, this is just incredible, you know. And I remember we were sailing along, and a pod of killer whales came alongside, and then you'd look out the other side, you'd have penguins porpoising, and yeah, just a phenomenal place. And I spent a little bit of time on South Georgia as well, because the expedition I was on was to retrace the Shackleton route. It was the centenary of the Endurance.
That's right, yeah, because I've obviously done my research. I remember now you talking about the Shackleton stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, if you haven't read up on the Shackleton, the Endurance expedition, what a guy and what a leader. And people who were in the party like Tom Crean, absolutely phenomenal guys. And you know, we're going back to a time when down wasn't a thing, and synthetic sleeping bags weren't a thing. You know, these guys were hauling hobnail boots and woolen jumpers, and you know, at -30, -40 for 2 or 3 winters, wintering over in Antarctica. You know, they were tough guys, and the opportunity came up to retrace the Shackleton route on a Navy expedition, and I absolutely jumped at it. And yeah, what a great time we had. I totally underestimated the sailing, because I'm not a sailor, and that was 4 or 5 days at a time, just at 22 degrees, just going along, trying to make scran, trying to do all your daily stuff that you do, making wets and showering or whatever it might be. And doing it on, on the tilt whilst doing 4-hour watches, and it was real tough. And I really underestimated the sailing side of it, because obviously I was there purely for the mountaineering, the leadership, leading the guys across South Georgia. And again, thinking about the the remoteness of it and the safety side of things, if something had happened down there, we would have had real dramas getting someone evacuated. But luckily it never came to that. And we had a great team. The selection process for that was 2 years long. Real good guys, and memories that I'll have forever, because it was a really good trip.
What are the other opportunities that you've had coming out of being an ML apart from the Shackleton trip? Because there are lots of different ones, expeditions up Everest and different things like that the Royal Marines Mountain Leaders have a part in. Have you done anything else like that?
Yeah, so I was lucky. Again, I've been quite lucky with my expeditions, and I've always kind of been in the right place at the right time. So the first one I did was to Alaska, and I came off the ML2s course. I went back to 4.2, and it just came up on orders one day that there was an expedition to Alaska, and they needed MLs for it. And I threw my hat in the ring, never thinking that they would take a young ML2 who was still wet behind the ears and only just finished his MLs course. And I got the phone call to say, yeah, you're in. And I was very lucky to go on it with a couple of really, really experienced ML1s who'd led expeditions all over the world. And I learned so much from them in that time. It was such a great trip, and it was all privately funded and it was to raise money for the Fire Brigade Benevolent Fund. And although we didn't summit, just the experience that I gained from that, I had a personal best altitude height and things like that, and leading guys back down who were suffering from altitude sickness and things like that. It was such a great trip. And then I went on from there to lead. The thing with expeditions is, if you get your name in the ring and you do a good job, you'll be asked back again. So then the Everest Expedition came up, and that was to take injured service personnel. It was Project Fortitude, as it was called then, to take injured service personnel to Everest region. And there was 3 teams. There was a climbing team who were going to climb Ama Dablam. There was a high altitude development team, which I ended up being on, who were going to climb 3 6,000 meter peaks. And there was the trekking teams who were going to trek to base camp, and that had people like Ben McBean, double amputees, guys in there with PTSD, guys in there with gunshot wounds. And I had, on my team, I had a lower limb amputee, Matt Kingston. I had Cy Greening, who you might know, who was shot in the chest and had a sucking chest wound, and he had a part of his lung missing. And we had Danny Claricoats, who was suffering from PTSD. So I had 3 guys, one in each rope team, who were injured service personnel. And the aim was to get them to 3 6,000 meter peaks, which we did. And it was a phenomenal achievement, especially for Matt. As you know, amputees expel a lot more energy than able-bodied guys do. So for him to summit 3 6,000 meter peaks was an absolute phenomenal achievement. So yeah, the expeditions have been amazing. But again, part of being an ML, we get to go to Switzerland every year. And I know this is a bone of contention for the PTIs. We get to go to Switzerland every year on exercise Ice Flip, which is a month-long high altitude concentration where we go out in small teams and develop our high altitude skills, which is, again, it's a really phenomenal trip, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to go and do that and to be paid for it. And it's a real gift that PUSA gives you. And it's one of the few sort of things left in the military, I think, where you can go and have fun and get some real great experience and get some real knowledge as well while you're there. So
I think what we're kind of missing when we're talking about this is that the Mountain Leaders branch, much like the physical training branch, is probably one of the oldest branches still as a additional qualification or a specialist qualification that the military holds. And it's quite a unique position to be in, because not many, well, I don't think the Army or the Navy or the RAF hold positions like that and have the specialist qualifications that you guys do, which is quite a unique position to be in, and probably why the training is long, is to make sure that the right caliber of person is going to be above and beyond the people that you're taking on the mountain, in the snow, in different positions, because they know that they can operate on their own in those positions. And I think that's something that kind of gets missed in translation. I mean, I take the piss all the time. Come on. I take the piss out of you all the time, call you a rock monkey, a rock ape, and stuff like
We have
that.
a lot of bands, mate, don't we? We do.
Ah, mate, loves a bit of bants. One of those things where when you really kind of tie it down, and this might be the beer talking, I don't know, but I haven't got a word for it. It's just really cool, you know, and to have something within a service like the Royal Marines to say that, you know, people are able to do that is pretty second to none, if I'm perfectly honest.
It is, yeah, and I think you can probably bring LCs in on that one, I guess, as well, because it's such a specialist capability, and again, I don't think there's anyone outside of the Corps who really does that amphibiosity piece quite like the LCs do. I mean, we all know they want to chuck you out 200 meters from the beach and get you wet, but you know,
because it's fun.
Yeah, it's a real skill, isn't it? You know, to get the guys, and again, it comes back to what are the Corps' two kind of specialist areas? Well, they're amphibiosity and vertical assault or mountaineering type scenario. So, you know, when you come off of that landing craft, there's a good chance you're going to hit a cliff and you need to get up it. So those are two skills that, you know, really need to be on our game, I think, within the Corps. Yeah.
What have you got going on outside of the military at the moment? So I know you've got a couple of things that you do. You do a little bit of stuff up on Dartmoor.
I'm lucky enough to live on Dartmoor, and I'm also lucky enough that I went away and used the knowledge and experience that I had as an ML to get civilian qualifications. And I mean, you know, as a PTI, that there's plenty of opportunities there if you can find the time to get away and get yourself, you know, civilian accredited with your qualifications, which you get a fair few quals anyway, don't you? But the actual ML's course doesn't give you any qualifications as such, but what it does give you is an extensive logbook to take away to someone and say, look, that's what I can do, and they will then accredit you. So I've been lucky enough to do all my stuff through JSMTC and get my summer ML, my rock climbing instructor, and all that sort of stuff, and that's allowed me then to go away and take out my own insurance and work with other guys and do some stuff, on the weekends and outside. And you know, as much as what I do, certainly at the minute, because obviously I'm still in the Corps, but what I do isn't going to pay the mortgage. It's a bit of extra pocket money on the side, but it's great. You know, Sunday afternoon up on Dartmoor, taking some kids climbing, and just some of them, you know, they're coming back week after week, and you see the thrill that they're getting from it. And there's a couple of kids there with, you know, with the mild learning difficulties and things like that. And for them to be outdoors, which, let's face it, kids don't do enough of nowadays, for them to be outdoors and the achievement they get when they top out on one of the climbs, it's absolutely brilliant. And one of the things I looked at was becoming a teacher after I leave the Corps. I've done a couple of extra teaching quals, topping up stuff I've done military side, and you know, I don't think there's anything better really than watching youngsters just having a great time, you know, doing a bit of climbing, doing a bit of whatever it is they're doing, and just being on Dartmoor. And like I say, I'm lucky enough to live right on the edge of the moor, and it's just got so much to offer up there, you know, and we know it as the place of misery, don't we, from laying in a puddle at 3 a.m. in the pouring rain, or yomping across Tor to Tor, you know, in the blowing wind. But actually, when you spend the summer on Dartmoor and you look at what it's got to offer, you know, the wild swimming or the climbing or the hill walking or whatever, it's just such a great place to base yourself. And I love it here. Yeah, I'll probably never move from where I am, to be fair. It's just got everything.
What do you find is one of the most memorable moments that you've had in your career to date? What stands out?
We had a full-on sort of blues parade presentation at the end of the ML2's course, and that was a massive day, you know, because it was the end of 9 months, and very much like when you pass out of training, you know, and all your family come down, and it was all great stuff like that. But for me, it's always going to have to be ops, because the time I spent in Afghanistan on Herrick 9, I was out there with 4-2 Recce. 4-2, the role we were doing was Battle Group South, and we were very much intelligence led. So we would act on information that was coming in on where to go, you know, where were the Taliban strongholds, where would we like to find drugs, or whatever it might be. And we were going places where no Western forces had been, which meant that the IED threat was really low, and obviously that's a good thing. But it also meant we were catching guys unawares, and people wouldn't, you know, we would just turn up and people weren't aware we were turning up. So we did a lot of scrapping, but albeit small arms stuff, because the IED threat was so low and the bomb threat was so low. So that was really good. But for me, I've only done one Afghanistan. There's guys out there who've done 3, 4, 5, and I look at them and I think, wow, you've got to be lucky, haven't you, to do that many. I did one, and I really enjoyed it, and it was a great time. We took very few casualties, really, and we just had a good time. We were young lads. We were going around doing, like we said before, we were doing the job we trained to do, and we were just relying on the guys next to us. Really, it was a simple life. All you had to do was just get through the day and stay alive. And that sounds a bit Chad and a bit cliche, but it totally was, because I had young lads who were walking. I was a team commander, and I had young lads who were walking point for 1,500 quid a month, thinking, is this my last step every time they stepped out the door? And you got to look at that and think, fucking hell, I've got a lot of admiration for them lads. And we're still in touch now. We've still got a WhatsApp group from our recce team and all that sort of stuff. And so the memories really from the whole of that Afghanistan trip were just phenomenal. Everything from having a piss up in the tent on Christmas Eve, right through to walking out the door and doing the job and scrapping. It was just a great time to be in the military, wasn't it, really?
Just a finishing point a little bit before we tie this up. What is one of your most memorable contacts, if you're able to spin a story?
Yeah, so we had it was an op we did down in Marja, and we were briefed up that there was an LS that we were going to land a site that we were going to land on, and there was also an alternate landing site, and we were crammed in the back of the Chinooks. And how we ever got away with that many blokes in the back of a Chinook, I don't know. It can't have been safe, but we were crammed in the back of a Chinook. You know what it's like? Everyone sat on the floor, sat on their kit. And we were flying into this landing site when it came across the net that the landing site we were going into, the Apaches had gone there before us and found that it was actually occupied by Taliban. So we had to go to the alternate landing site. And we were coming into this alternate landing site, and it ended up being just a real muddy, boggy field because it had been rainy season. And I remember that the Chinook came in and the wheels just got stuck, and everyone in the back of the Chinook just got thrown forwards, and there was guys everywhere, there was kit everywhere, and it took a good couple of minutes for everyone to sort their shit out, basically, and get their kit squared and to get off the back tail ramp. But the minute we stepped off that tail ramp, there was rounds whizzing above our heads, and straight away we were into it. So I headed into a bun line where I lined out my team, and I remember the other recce teams were on the other side of a building which was just to our left, and we were there for a couple of minutes, and I sort of had my map out, was trying to work out where we were, which buildings were what on the spot map. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a car comes flying around the corner, and my GPMG gunner and my 2IC who was hoofing, they just both opened up on this vehicle. The vehicle went off the road, burst into flames, and some guys got out. And at this point, I was still looking at my map. I had no clue what was going on. I hadn't seen the car. Luckily, the other lads had. And these three guys got out and just started engaging us from no more than 10 meters away. It was so close. And we ended up, there was an exchange of gunfire, there was an exchange of grenades, believe it or not. And we fire maneuvered back. And we did it. Actually, it was actually caught on Apache. The Apache that was buzzing above had actually filmed it and recorded it and caught it on camera. And I remember watching it when we got back to Kandahar. But when you looked at it, it was a textbook fire maneuver extraction and then a peel left behind the building. And you know what? All six of us came out of that alive. And how on earth we did 3 dead Taliban, six bootnecks good to go. And yeah, wow, what a crazy 15 minutes, and then we obviously had to go through once the car had finished and settled down, because there was RPGs cooking off, there was rounds fizzing over our heads, and it was just a crazy 15 minutes. But when we went back and confirmed 3 enemy dead, and that then led on to another pretty much 2 days. We were attached to L Company. and L Company had a real good couple of days, fighting with the Taliban. And I remember it being in the news that there was something like 103 Taliban were killed in 3 days. Well, I don't know how they worked that out, but it is what it is. And yeah, we had a real good time. But yeah, what a crazy 15 minutes of my life that was.
Mate, stories like that, I got goosebumps with you talking about it. I mean, look, I've got people and stories myself that are very, very similar to that. And it's going to sound really cliche and a little bit cheesy, but I love hearing about stuff like that too, because look, you're talking about 15 minutes of a 4-day op. All the other stuff that would have been involved in that, there is so much more story, background and things like that that come with that. And there are so many people with so many different stories. And it's just those 15 years of Herrick's and Telek are iconic. They've got to be. And you listen to some of the stories very similar to what you were just talking about there. And it's mind-blowing. I know I get a lot of feedback when I talk to people like yourself from a civilian population. They're like, we just hang on people's words. And do you know what? I can understand it, because I'm hanging on every word that you're talking about there. Like,
You're totally right, mate. That was 15 minutes of a 4-day op of a 6-month tour. Just for me, for one guy, you multiply that by 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 guys over 10 years. And, I've got books here of all sorts of bits and Herrick's and para ones and bootneck ones and all sorts of stuff. But, you read some of them and you think, actually, yeah, and especially when the paras on Herrick 4, the housing, they had Taliban coming in the door. And yes, you look around now and I don't think you can ever be far from someone, walking down the street who's not been in a situation of some sort, over the years. And you look at all the veterans out there and, all the stuff that's going on with veterans and PTSD and stuff like that. And you've got to think, there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and it all comes back to, bits like that, doesn't it?
Do you know what it reminds me of a lot? It reminds me of, do you remember Sharp?
Yeah.
The ITV TV series Sharp with, what's his
Sean
name?
Bean. Yeah.
Sean Bean. And just reminds me of that. It reminds me of like him being away in Spain and Portugal and France, and then coming back to England and having an uprising in London and stuff like that. It just stories always remind me of that. I don't know why it
does, and I'll never forget. I came home from Afghanistan, and I was in Tesco, as you are, doing the shopping, and someone was getting, I can't remember what it was about. Someone got so worked up over something so trivial in the queue, and I just thought, you know what, like, there's far worse things going on in the world right now than you're worrying about. I can't remember what it was, like, but the price of something or other. And yeah. But hey, like I say, you look at guys, and it's great because one thing the Corps does really well is things like obviously not at the moment, but reunions and annual dinner and dances and that sort of stuff, where guys get together and sit around and spin bits, and that is the key, really, isn't it? It's talking about the things that happened. And I don't know how true it is, but someone told me once that the reason PTSD cases were so low in the Royal Marines after the Falklands was because they sailed back, and so they had 2 weeks basically of sitting around on ship, spinning bits with each other and talking about what had gone on, whereas the paras and others had flown home. And apparently, I don't know how true it is, like I say, but apparently cases were far higher. But there you go. So yeah, I mean, it's always great to spin a bit, isn't it, over a wet? So hopefully we'll get to do that soon.
Beautiful, mate. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Just to finish off, then, have you got anything on the burner at the moment? You got anything going on?
No, not really. We're all pretty stale at the minute, aren't we? No, it's just trying to get out, do fizz, keep yourself sane. I mean, keep the missus and kids, keep them sane as well, because you're all cooped up together, aren't you? And I'm working out. I'm off short term. I'm off to Scotland. Luckily, I'm getting a 2-week trip up to do some military training in Scotland. So I'm quite looking forward to that. Actually, it's over a year since I've even been away anywhere. This time last year I was just coming back from an op. I haven't been anywhere since, and as much as I like to be at home, a year is a long time to not go away, especially when you've had 22, 23 years of being away a lot. And like I say, as much as I don't want to be away, it'd be nice to get a bit of time and get some snow in, of course.
Matt Hoey, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on the podcast. I appreciate your time, buddy.
And yours. Take care, buddy. Speak soon.
Yeah, you too, mate. And that's it. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe on your podcast provider. And also follow the Grumpy Surfer on Instagram. Thanks for listening.